Namaste, viewers, and welcome to Wisdom Lab with Professor Subhash Kak. I'm so delighted to invite you to this program, Subhashji. We've been associated for a very long time, and there are very few people I admire, more than you, your breadth of work, your wisdom. You've been on our podcast earlier, but just for the viewers who are just joining in, Professor Subhash Kak was the Regents Professor of Computer Science at Oklahoma State. He's a bit of a prodigy. Why bit? A full-scale prodigy. He got his PhD at 33 from IIT Delhi. He's written many, many books. The latest two books are on artificial intelligence and Project Omega. But he's written on a variety of topics, gods within, mind consciousness, mind and self, the architecture of knowledge, computing science in ancient India, the e-dimensionality. Wow, what an amazing concept. In search of the cradle of civilization. I can go on and on. There's more than 20 books he's written. So Subhashji, once again, thank you so much for joining us in Wisdom Lab. And, thank you for your time. So, viewers, the topic for today, for me at least, is very important and interesting. Everyone knows that the United States of America is celebrating the 250th year of the Declaration of Independence, of its founding. And a lot of conversations have happened around it. But Subhashji, I would request you, especially for our Wisdom Lab, because we want to look at things in a deeper, more profound light or perspective. What do you think is the spiritual significance of this?
Thank you, Makranji, for having me once again on your show. Lots of wonderful things are happening. One small correction, PhD at 23. But, that's irrelevant, really, to our discussion.
Sorry, did I say 33? I'm so sorry. 23 is what I meant. That's why I said he's such a prodigy. I'm so sorry. I guess you came to the US around 32, if I remember right. So, in fact, I was going to ask you that. I mean, one of the things I wanted to ask you is when you came here, it was more than 50 years ago. How has the country changed? But let's start with the question I asked, which is, the deeper significance, if you like, or the spiritual significance of America at 250.
Well, it's a very interesting time, a fraught time as well. Interesting because one wonders and is pleased at the durability of the United States of America. It's already been 250 years. And as an imperium, if you go back into history, you find that empires have all kinds of issues in a century or two, and their power wanes, but somehow USA has managed to maintain its strength. And that is also because it's sort of different from other empires. It's a kind of a one with a two-sided look to it. On the one side, it's devoted to freedom for all and equality and all that, but it had a problem within the nation, which it has tried to deal with. But on the other side, as an imperial power, it's been quite ruthless, if you will. If you look at events which have taken place after the Second World War, in making sure that its rivals did not come back up. It's used every trick in the trade to put them down, Soviet Union first, and now it's fighting China and possibly other rivals around the world. So that's one side. The other side is that while we laud the good that it has done, because it's also been an agent to inspire colonized nations to rise up and be like the USA, be free. But a lot of these nations have also discovered that checks and balances, which is what has helped USA quite a bit in its 250 years, is not so easy to implement because it also requires self-restraint. And often polities in most nations are not able to exercise self-restraint. And we see that even in India. The recent protests that have been in the news. So all in all, very interesting story for historians to ponder, and also to recognize that we are indeed, as a lot of people in the Bay Area mentioned, we are in an inflection point because of AI. So past history is not going to be a judge, is not going to be a pointer to how things might unfold in the coming decades, because as we know, the world population is collapsing and plunging, and that's going to happen to US as well. And there are some estimates that in the next 250 years, the world population will be 1/80th to 1/100th of what it is now. So everything can be thrown out of the window in the sense of, can the past tell us where the future is going to take us?
Yes, yes, absolutely. In fact, the last point is so fascinating because some people think that there are these recurrences, there are cycles, you see. Nietzsche talked about the eternal recurrence, so that it's actually the past which predicts the future, if not in the exact same way, but in patterns. But we won't go into that. We won't talk about that or even AI immediately. I really wanted to sort of probe you a little deeper, because everyone talks about, the imperium. Some people say it's the end of the age of empire. They compare it with the Roman Empire, the British Empire. Some people say it's in the middle. Who knows? And geopolitics, Russia, China, etc. But I actually, as I said, I've been trying to explore the inner spiritual significance, for human consciousness, for evolution, because we sometimes read Sri Aurobindo. He wrote The Human Cycle. He talked about, the evolution being something that was not just confined to the inside of the human being, but societies evolve, polities evolve, nations evolve. And he was looking at the, different experiments that nations and societies have conducted in order to try to create a better world for everyone. So do you think that the United States had a special role in that evolution, or at least for the spiritual growth of humanity, Because I can even be a little more specific, Swami Vivekananda was very deeply influenced by America. In fact, he came onto the world stage because of the platform he got here. And when he went back, even when he passed away, he chose the 4th of July very deliberately. So I'm wondering if there is a dialogue between the liberty, the whole enshrined value, one of the values of America, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and liberation, moksha, which we Sanatanis, we are so obsessed with this, So I'm sort of somebody who has been in the field, who's a Vedantist, who's worked so deeply in consciousness. You've written on Trika as well. I mean, what is the spiritual significance of this anniversary and of United States as a country coming into its own?
I think where United States has been quite unique is in its total commitment to pushing the machine framework in society by deliberately or explicitly pointing to structures, and structures not just in industry, but structures in government as well. And that's what has pushed into the model of the world as things to the extent it can. And that itself, now one might say, but isn't that against spirituality? Because the spirit is something which is underlying things or which transcends things. But just as in Ishavasya Upanishad, you speak of this dichotomy of avidya and vidya. The more you push at avidya is materiality, suddenly vidya stands out, because then you start asking, now what is behind this materiality? What is behind these structures? Because the very question of what is liberty comes up. And there's been a lot of discussion recently in the United States that do people really have liberty? Is it really various organizations, for example, in healthcare, the pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies, the government deciding and then putting all this information in your heads? And the same thing in the way higher education has evolved in the last century, are people being indoctrinated. And perhaps they are. Perhaps people have very little freedom. And that's precisely what Vedanta also tells us, that we might think we are free, but we really are not. Because freedom is always one step beyond where we think we end, where the body ends. But where does the body end? Because this is really a dance between freedom and bondage. Bondage to the community and society. And we have to be in bondage, because otherwise we'll not be a person of the world. So we have to be in bondage. And this is a very interesting paradox. And I think American history highlights this paradox more than any other history, because in other histories there was a lot of focus on manners, on style, like British history, or you look at the Spanish Empire or the French, short-lived French Empire. So style was important. Now, the Americans are in some sense a rough people. Okay, plain-speaking people. And since there was no style, people have been compelled to really look into the very nature of this polity. And all that discussion is out in the open, and all of that is pointing to, perhaps through its institutions, America has led people to bondage of a certain kind, to its own imperium, but that process is also setting people free. This whole technological society has taken us to a point where both in science and technology, we are asking the question, what is it to be a human being? What is it that gives us our agency? So all of these things are coming together, and perhaps 250 years of the American state is a wonderful time to mark this passage, because where we are getting into now is going to be extremely, totally different from where history has brought us.
Yes, yes. In fact, one of the, things that fascinated me about your answer is how, we have to problematize these ideas, whether it's of liberty or of liberation. And I like the fact that you accept that we live, in a bounded world, and you are talking about freedom relationally with other human beings and with institutions, with frameworks and systems, because sometimes, which really means fundamentally that you're accepting, some sort of embodiment, because an extreme Vedantic position would really, it's an ajatavad, nothing was brought into being, there's no manifestation, there's only Brahman, and whatever you see is adhyasa, adhyaropa, whatever. But so I think, your slightly more worldly approach to this problem or this question is refreshing. And in fact, in a way, it's trika as well, because, you accept the world, you accept Shiva, you accept the jiva as well, and you want to, somehow make all of these work in a certain manner which is enabling and not disabling. So, which is why I feel that 250 years of the survival of a democratic government with an orderly transfer of power is itself unique in the history of human polity. There's never been another nation like this. It's the oldest democracy, of course. And despite all the challenges, the Civil War, the deaths, the two world wars, the crash of the Great Depression and what have you, and the tremendous crisis we are actually in the midst of, even so, this system seems to have survived and actually created certain opportunities for people who have embraced it. So maybe in our next episode, we can go into some of these opportunities, because as Indians who, were received here, or we came here, or whatever it is, it's been quite a good run, and maybe we'll pick this up in the next part. But if you have a couple of concluding comments for a few minutes, go ahead, please.
Um, yeah, I think what United States teaches historians and the average person is that, look, you have a rule-based order, and that has served America well. And they have taken with the rules, as every society must, because circumstances change and people's expectations change, and technology is the big driver of these changes. And technology over the last 200 years has been absolutely unprecedented, from airplanes to computers and now to AI. And so how much more can this rule-based order be twisted to serve the unfoldments that are going to be around the corner, is the question to ask.
Fantastic. So we'll pick this up in our next episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Viewers, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. This is called the Wisdom Lab. Or a Wisdom Workshop rather, a think tank with a difference. We are not just dealing with politics and the usual polemics, strategic speculations, but we want to dive a little deeper and, actually see human history as a flow of consciousness, not just of external events. So thank you, Subhaji. Thank you so much for your, words of wisdom and for supporting us. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you.